So I'm out in Fountainstown. There's Angela's coffee shop over there. Beach behind me. Don't know what he's selling over there, but you can buy food and whatnot. So I had a bit of a rant on the bus coming down because there were some young people shouting their heads off, and after I gave out to them for shouting their heads off as if there was no one else on the bus, they actually started talking to me, and the conversation got kind of interesting. They were like, "Who are you? What are you? Blah blah blah." I said to them, "I'm actually a computer scientist and a sociologist, and I studied law." Because one of them said, "Oh, you can't be recording us. We're minors." And I said, well, without even looking around, I pointed to where all the cameras were on the bus upstairs. And I said, "You're in a public place, you have no expectation to privacy, no matter what age you are." So we actually got talking, and I said to them, "You're being lied to about everything." They were like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're being lied to about everything. You guys think you know everything, and you think you've got access to all this information, Google and all that kind of stuff." I said, "But you're actually being lied to about everything." And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I said to them, "How much of the atmosphere, how much does CO2 comprise of the atmosphere?" And they were like, "Oh, a huge amount. CO2 is a huge amount." And I was like, "Actually, it's 0.04% of the atmosphere is CO2. So I said to them, obviously, follow-up question. I said, "How much of that CO2 is produced by humans, human activity?" And they're like, "Oh, well, after getting the 0.4% bit, they were totally confused and flummoxed." So I told them it's 0.04%. And I said, "You're being lied to about climate change." "Oh, but the climate changes." And I said, "Yeah, it does. It changes over thousands and thousands of years. You're being lied to about our effect on the climate. In fact, what's being lost in this argument," I told them, "is that environmentalism is being lost." And I told them about forever chemicals, EPAs and EPOAs that are endocrine disruptors. And they're like, "What's that?" And I said, "It messes around with your hormones." And I said, "That's why you've got this sudden surge in people thinking they're trans when they're not really. It's just their hormones are screwed with." So they're looking at me. I'm like, "Guys, you're being lied to about everything. The war in Ukraine, you're being lied to about that as well. The war in Ukraine started in 2014 when Viktor Yanukovych was elected president, with international observers saying that the elections were democratically held and fairly held, and the CIA and Victoria Nuland and some MEPs and George Soros funding helped to oust Yanukovych, and he had to flee the country because he was more in favor of relations with Russia than the EU, and Poroshenko was installed instead of him. And now we have Zelensky, who is literally a clown. He was a comedian and an actor. There's video of him on the internet dancing in high heels and lingerie. West Ukraine was bombing East Ukraine for 8 years, and going on 9 now, and they killed 13,000 people. And Putin was begging the West to find a peaceful solution, and they blocked all his attempts. He had the Minsk agreement, and Zelensky was about to sign it, and at the last second France and the UK intervened and he didn't sign it. And then they had another peace agreement which Putin showed at a press conference a couple of weeks ago, last week actually, and they had another peace agreement which Zelensky also refused to sign. So guys, you're being lied to about all kinds of things. So obviously the subject of COVID came up. And I said, yeah, you're being lied to about that as well. Oh, it was found in a wet market. No, it wasn't. There are 7 wet markets in Wuhan. And they searched all 7 wet markets for traces of SARS-CoV-2 and they couldn't find it. It's a genetically altered virus. I know that some people say viruses don't exist and they're just stupid, but anyway, you've got different theories when it comes to health, and some people say you're detoxing. Same people say the earth is flat, but anyway, you've got a report from the US Senate called Muddy the Waters, the origins of COVID-19, and they searched all 7 wet markets in Wuhan for SARS-CoV-2 and couldn't find any trace of it. What they did discover was that there was gain of function research financed by the US through a company called EcoHealth Alliance, and that gain of function research especially focused on certain areas of coronaviruses. Sorry, no, car going past. And the scientists in the lab got sick and the virus was leaked. The scientists were sent off to get retraining, and didn't they go and get the virus again and leaked it a second time 2 weeks later, and the lab was taken over by the Chinese military. So we also know that 54 members of the Irish military attended the Wuhan military games in October 2019, and they won a bronze medal for boxing. You can Google all that, blah blah blah. And when they came back, half of them were sick, and 4 of them ended up in ICU with unknown viral pneumonia. That was November 2019. So we know this virus was circulating in late 2019, and that's been confirmed by this US Senate report. So needless to say, these young people on the bus got an education that they weren't expecting during their school holidays. But yeah, the climate changes over vast periods of time. We were at our closest point to the sun on the 3rd of January 2020 in what's called a Milankovitch cycle, and we're actually moving away from the sun, and the sun is going through a period of what's called a grand solar minimum, where there's very little activity on the surface of the sun, and we get very few sunspots and CMEs, coronal mass ejections. And the sun is the biggest influence on the weather on our planet. Look at this guy here. And we're standing on top of him almost, and he still doesn't move. But yeah, so the kids were quite surprised with the schooling they got in the 15-20 minutes of a bus ride when I started talking to them. And there you go. That's it. That's today's video. Go on.